Hey, all. We are just talking about what we're going to do for our podcast today. And so I decided to hit record. Um, Interesting thing was we're thinking about sort of like a operating system neutral or agnostic development environment. And I think there's a lot of places we can go with this. It's sort of the things we can do. It's how you connect to that. Because that's the bonus of working for yourself is I define pretty much everything. There are just like a couple of those places where, I've got customers that are like their, Windows shop or something. So I have to do a few things. And funny enough, TurboTax for business only exists on Windows. You cannot get it on Mac. You can get everything else, but not that. So I have a Windows machine specifically for TurboTax every year so I can do my taxes. And occasionally I use it for other things. I had a customer that had an iTunes thing. I digress. It reminds me back in the day of like when we had sneaker nets and stuff like that. And you always had, and I think it still makes sense. So I think that's maybe what we'll talk about is things like setting up your environment and setting up yourself so you can be very mobile in your coding. And we can probably go into a couple of different things. I do like that, because we can talk about like portable apps and setting stuff up like that. Some of those devices, making sure you can get your mail, and then just like the general thoughts around that. So I think that's probably a pretty cool. Was that sort of where you're thinking of going?
Yeah, because I kept trying to remember that portable apps. I was like, I know there was something out there that you just put on a thumb drive, but even there, in some environments, your thumb drives,
Get locked out.
right. So, and it was even interesting. So you just mentioned TurboTax. So I remember before I got my Steam Deck that I would actually go out to the Windows developer site and actually download the VirtualBox image for Windows and install Oblivion on it so I could play Oblivion every once in a while. So you could actually install your TurboTax that way, do your taxes once a year, then basically turn off your image and read it.
I've thought of that. I've also got, there's also like, because I actually ended up spinning it up for the one customer. I spun up through Chematerra. I think you can get reasonable Windows VMs that are full blown Windows 10. It was like, I think if you don't, if you've got like one processor and like a gig of memory or something, which runs pretty much what you need, I think it was like $20 a month, something like that. So yeah, you could just come in, spin your system up, install everything on it, and then bring it back down, which actually what we did for our development. We had multiple Windows development environments for, I don't know, 3 months basically, and then shut them all down afterwards. So there are those kinds of things. So yeah, there's enough little options to that I think, why not? We'll go ahead and dive in and see how this goes. Sound good?
1 second to grab a drink, and I'll be right back.
I'll allow that. For the rest of you, go get your own drink. Grab some caffeine or caffeine free if you're trying to go caffeine free. I'm going to suck down a little water there I'm going to do a little bit more so I can make sure that the vocal cords are fresh. And now that Michael's back, we can start. We can do that anyways because the podcast people, they have no idea where we are or what we're doing. Hello and welcome back. We are into yet another episode of Building Better Developers, Developreneur podcast. This episode, look, I'm going to right away talk to you about this one. This episode, we're going to talk about what could I call them operating system agnostic environments. These are some of the things that actually goes back. I think I actually talked about them in the Developreneur book. I think we talked a little bit about we talked about like having personal repositories and some things like that. We talked about being able to have like a mobile development environment for yourself. And probably today it is more important than it has been in the past. But the good news is there are way more tools available to help you to do this than there ever were in the past. And so that's where our focus is going to be. First, before we get too far into it, my name is Rob Broadhead. I'm one of the founders of Developreneur, Building Better Developers, also founder of RB Consulting. On the other side is I'm not even going to tell you a name. I'm going to let him introduce himself, name included this time around.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Malash. I'm also co-founder of Developreneur and founder of Envision QA, where we help healthcare and small businesses build applications and test software.
Now let's just dive right into it. This is one of those things that I probably is not as much of an issue now when you're remote, but when you're in an office, there are things that you run into. Now, some of them you don't want to, we'll call it, work around them because it could get you fired. It's like, or it's illegal or something like that. Particularly if you're like DOD or something like that, where yeah, you need to be like, cross all your T's and dot all your I's. However, there's a lot of value in being able to have a mobile development environment for yourself where you can at any given time pretty much just sit down, grab a machine or something and dive in. Now, one of the worst cases that I've known of somebody that's run into this and really was found that their backup system, we'll call it, was invaluable, is they were traveling and their laptop died. It got like crushed in the flight. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was dead. They needed to work. The good news is they had a thing called portable apps. It was a Windows development environment they had. They had a hard drive backup. So they were able to basically take that hard drive, plug it into a kiosk somewhere to, like a business center PC, and they were able to run all their stuff. They didn't have to do a bunch of installations or anything. They had everything already set up. So it took them almost no time to convert over. So that if it's a portable apps originally was Windows only. There is a Mac version out there. I don't think it's being maintained because you really don't need that for a Mac. I mean, it's these days, it's like usually if you jump on any Mac, it's going to have essentially the same stuff. Just the need for it has sort of disappeared. However, and Windows is sort of the same if you think of the cloud, but if you need something installed on your machine, then you may want to go that route. You also may want to and it's cheap now to have a really big honking external USB drive that's pretty good speed, and you can put if you want, you can. And for a while, I had installs for my entire. I had it for my IDE. I was doing Java Tomcat, so I had the version of Java that I was on. I had an executable. It was on Windows, yes. And sorry, just crossed myself because I used to have to do that. I had the Java environment. I had at the time I was using a thing called My Eclipse, which was just like Eclipse with some extra stuff, but I had that executable. I had the Tomcat stuff because I was pushing everything. I was using Tomcat, and I had MySQL. So I had maybe my Jamp stack instead of Linux and everything. Actually, it would have been a WAMP, I guess, but it was without PHP. It was with the J. And so forget the letters. It was Java, database, web, and an IDE, and a partridge in a pear tree. But I also had like Ant. I use Ant at the time. I still do actually use it heavily for moving stuff around, build scripting and things like that. So that all made for a pretty easy way for me, if I needed to jump on a machine, fire everything up, and just go. Particularly if I'm on if I'm traveling or something like that, and something happens to my laptop. Luckily, it didn't. But I always made sure I had, which was a bonus, is I had my local development environment on my machine, but then I always copied on a regular basis back to my hard drive. Now, flash forward a few years and then created this thing called Dropbox, or you may also use Box, or you may use the Windows uses whatchamadigger, I forget what they call it, but Windows has got their own file stuff, Google Drive. You've got all of these different things. So you've got all of these opportunities to put, and I highly recommend that you do that, is have your development environment on your local machine set up so that whatever your cloud provider thing is, that it's syncing it up there. So if it's Google, it should sync up to your Google Drive. If it's Dropbox, sync up to Dropbox. If it's, you name it, sync it up to there. Use that, because if something happens and you can pull that stuff right back down. And I have had it happen, not even traveling. I've had it, it's just like sitting there working one day and the hard drive on my development machine dies. boom, I'd swap it out and I'm ready to go again. Or I could just move to another machine and then everything's synced up. Now, of course, there's this other thing they haven't even mentioned right now is version control. Make sure that if you're committing your code on a regular basis, like, and I mean regular, like multiple times a day, not like once a year, then you'll have all of that and you can just pull the latest version and you're off and running. So that should help you as well. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I'm talking about low-tech solutions so far, but I'm going to flip it over to Michael and let him talk about some of the other, I guess, the higher tech things, we'll call it that, things like virtual machines and containers and stuff like that, because that also, and we'll use the D word, everybody, or its variants of Docker and those other things that are now becoming very commonplace, I find, in the development world. And we'll let you sort of take over there and talk about your experience with those and how you can see those being a good solution.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So even before Docker and like Kubernetes and all these containerizations that have been out there, probably about a decade or so ago, it was really big was VMware and virtual machines and being able to run Citrix within an environment. So you create a operating system within an environment, you configure it, and then you essentially clone it for different users. And that essentially started this whole idea, like the portable apps, things like that. People are like, well, why can't we do that with our applications? Why can't we do that with our desktops? So today we now have, Google Drive, we have Docker, we have virtual storage locations. So now with containers, we can now even virtualize our environments more. So what you can do now is you can actually create a folder structure, store all of your application files, your development environments, everything in that nature, store it in one place. And then you could essentially create a container and spin up the container with your environment already set up. So you could actually back up your virtual environment. So like if you're running Linux, you could create a Linux container with all of your virtual, your Eclipse, your IDEs, whatever you need, your JVMs, whatever you need to do your work. You basically build this container, you set it all up, and then you back up your container. You store that in a virtual environment on Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever. But you have that file structure that you essentially attach as a virtual drive to these containers. And now you have the ability to just plug and play containers and just attach your file system. So now if you do what Rob was suggesting and you create version controls of your file system, you can now keep track of all of your files. You have virtual backups. You can use Git. You can use, Subversion, and you could set up and essentially do a time machine, what Mac has for backups of your development environment, or basically your desktop. I saw you come off mute there, Rob. Did you have?
I was just going to say, I just had it like, no, you cannot use Subversion. You can use Git, but you can use RCS. You can use anything but Subversion. Sorry, I just had to throw that in. You go right in.
Well, I was trying to avoid was it CSV, CVS? I always get that flipped. I don't know why they named it so close, but
I think that was probably before CSVs, but yeah, CVS, RCS, which to me was actually less painful than Subversion. Although I know people love Subversion and all that. I was rather like back to like, was it Source Safe? I think was the original Microsoft one before eventually became the Teams version control. I forget what it's called now because they've changed it a couple names, but I digress. I'm sorry. I was just like, I almost had to say something and I was like, all right, I'll come off mute just in case I need to like, at some point, if you say something like that again, carry on.
No, but as Rob was saying that, really though, today Git is primarily what you should be using for version control, or something newer than that. Pretty much Git is it right now for most developers. But where I was going with this is not only Linux, but you can set up your own Windows machines. For those of you listening to the podcast, if you jump on and watch the pre-video for this, we actually talked about some additional ways you could actually spin up like Windows machines virtually and install software and test things on that. Not only for development and setting up your environments, but this is also a great way to test different versions of software. You can also test your environments in different OS levels. So you could spin up different containers for, say, Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 8. It just depends what you need. But the whole idea of this concept that we're talking about is setting yourself up to where you're essentially operating system neutral or essentially environment neutral. And where this came from is I have dealt with so many companies over the years in so many different jobs where there's so many security policies in place that are there to protect the company, sure, but they can also impact us as developers and our ability to work. For example, you could have a policy that comes down that now blocks all your Maven dependencies. You now can't pull down your Maven versions to actually install and run your software. Ways to get around that? Well, you can go out and actually download all the jars, put them in a central repository, and then pull them in that way. There's ways around this, but if you think essentially neutral, set yourself up to where these policies, these things won't impact you. And that way, if you do it right, no matter where you go, what system you're working on, you can pretty much sit down on any machine, plug in your or connect to your virtual drive, plug in your thumb drive, whatever, and essentially you're up and running no matter where you're at.
And it's one of these, especially if you're any sort of we'll call it the road warrior that they used to talk about. It is actually very valuable to have that. And it is easy, or it is easier now to carry around a like a little tablet, or you've got like the Microsoft Surface or some of those kinds of things that are pretty small. You can have a fairly small, fairly lightweight laptop, or the Android book Chromebooks. The thing you want to look at with those, though, because you could have a really just awesome, if you're traveling a lot, you get a dirt cheap Chromebook for, I don't know, 100, 150 bucks. I think they're pretty cheap for that. So it's going to be less than a desktop. The key there is just to have enough of your stuff offloaded from the computer so that you're not having to like build this entire, you don't have to have this big honking thing. You can have this really cheap little thing, throw a couple of files on there, make sure you can do, editing and building. And then a lot of it, particularly if you've got somewhere out on a cloud where you've got a container or something like that, then you can always go hit that, telnet into it, SSH into it, whatever you need to do, and you can work there. You can also use a lot of the tools that are out there we've talked about before, somewhere along the way, a while back now. Talked about Cloud9 and some of those kinds of things where they are cloud-first tools. Feel free to, I would say, regularly use your favorite search engine to look for cloud-based IDEs or cloud-based development tools, things along those lines. Do those searches because there's a lot of stuff that pops out, and there's a lot of projects out there. There's one I came across, it was a Visual Studio Code that was built for like a lightweight kind of thing so that you could put it on just about any, and those kinds of things are cross-platform enough that you can run them pretty much anywhere. I think you can run some of this stuff outside on your phone. Worst case, learn VI or Emacs or something like that, and you can literally. I've got a little app that allows me to remote in. I don't know if it's the same one Michael uses. It is what is it called? Telius, I think is what it's called. I'm looking at my phone right now. Termius, Termius. Allows you to do, you can do regular telnet, you can do SSH into a machine. It gives you a nice little, your standard, console can do, and it's got your basic escape keys and stuff like that as well. So you can work around in a remote environment if you need to. If you need something more GUI related, tablets work really well. You do have to watch out because if you get onto a lot of them now, especially the Apple-based ones, there's a double click it gets overridden. So if you're clicking on a form or need to double click a form or something like that, it does mess with your navigation. But that being said, swinging back around to the original point before I pass it on to this guy that just did a little finger in the air. It's you want to watch out if it's a security related thing, then you need to make sure that you conform. But there are going to be things like Michael brought up perfect examples of where you can't work because the security gets in the way. So make sure that you're thinking you look for ways to do it that would be secure, like copying files local, or talk to your network administrator, security people to say, hey, we need access to this. You in the back, you raised your hand.
So one other thing we were mentioned, so we've talked about open apps or that app tool that that you can install apps on thumb drives. The other thing to think about too, when you're dealing with applications for virtual work and things of that nature, look at the binary versions of those applications. And by binary, I mean, like, for instance, if you have like Eclipse can run on a Java runtime. Not Libre, OpenOffice will also run on the Java runtime. You have WinZip, which will run on just about everything, or 7 Plus, which I think comes with both installers if you download it. So these are things you can download, put on a thumb drive, and literally plug in. And as long as you have like Java, or you have the compiler or the runtime, you can run these applications literally on any machine in any environment if you have access to the thumb drive. Otherwise, you would need to download them from a virtual storage like Docker or Google Drive.
What you can do, I mean, it's like I said, it's become more common to have cloud access of varying sorts. Sorry, I'm just choking. It's causing me so emotional right now. There's cloud access to so many of these things that you can, for example, if you throw it out in Dropbox, then you might be able to just pull it down. If you have a secure server, you may have even a personal server that you can lock down to the point where it's like the only way you can get to it is through a VPN or through, from specific IPs. There's a lot you can do to make your stuff available. We'll call it your stuff, but also make it only available to yourself, or in a way that only, that you can turn on and off access to it so that it does prevent, it like covers the security types of issues while also making the stuff available to you, which is really the key here. Is you want to be able to be productive and not spend days going through and configuring stuff and environments and stuff, which is sort of my last thought on this one. Is also where once you set up your IDE in your environment, whatever you can, take a snapshot or something of it. A lot of places, it's like they'll allow you to export your configuration, all your settings and stuff like that. Particularly if you're in there and you've got all these little special fonts you do and color schemes and all these things that you can do, make sure that you export those. And this includes making sure that you get in a habit of consistent directories and folders and file names and locations, so that when you jump on another machine, that they're all relative to some starting point that you can easily set. If not, do them as standard as possible so that you can get access to it, so that you can easily just jump in and go instead of having to remap all of your settings the next time you jump on a machine. Parting thoughts from you, Mike?
Yeah, I would like to kind of add to that. So we've talked about, portable apps, things of that nature, and taking snapshots of your development environment. The other thing is maybe download all of the utilities and applications that you use and store them in a offline location, either Gmail, thumb drives, Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever. Because if you put them in a place that you secure, in most situations, you can get access to that wherever you're at, whereas you might be blocked from some of those sites to actually get the tools you need to do your job. You
may also, and we'll wrap this one up on that, but you may also lose access to those. There have been, I used to periodically, this back in the day, I would actually burn stuff to CD like every 6 months that was my utility stuff, because it was easier to get it off of that than it was off of a thumb, and actually it was more accessible to have a CD as an event than a DVD than there was a thumb drive. Nowadays, you can probably put it out and you have network access, but you may want to have it on a thumb drive. Make sure it's your thumb drive, however you have it set up, that you have the dongles or whatever you need in case you have a USB thumb drive and you end up on a machine that only has USB 3 ports, or USB-C, I guess it is now. There's things like that you want to run in, that you want to make sure you don't run into compatibility issues. But those things are great for you because you may find that your favorite utility no longer, is no longer supported or whatever happens. You also need to make sure you have the licensing stuff if for whatever you've purchased, so that you've got the right keys and all that kind of stuff that you need to. That being said, you don't need any special keys, licenses, or anything else to listen to us or to give us feedback. So as always, feel free to shoot us an email at info@developreneur.com. Check us out on our @Developreneur Twitter, well, now X stuff. Facebook, we've got a page. LinkedIn, we've got a page. Go to developreneur.com, developreneur.com. And leave us notes there. Post, we've got contact us forms, and also tons and tons of content for you to peruse. You can also check us out on YouTube. Lots of stuff there as well, including you can see this instead of just listen to it. So, and you get bonus material that always occurs. So we'll wrap this one up. We're not done yet. We're going to continue. We're actually getting close. We're trying to figure out how we want this to look as far as wrapping up this season and what the next season will be. But we're getting into that. We're getting about to that point where we'll probably call it, shut the books on season 21. We'll be on season 22. Amazingly enough, once again, way beyond, we've got more seasons than some people have podcast episodes. That being said, I hope that you have a great season and lots of cool podcast episodes in your future. Go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Bonus material, anything else? Because this is one of those that, okay, bonus material, because you people are looking, because you can see this is, if I'm on the right screen, this is portable apps. And I'm going to blow this up a little bit because you probably can't see it real well. These are the apps that are on, and it's portableapps.com. Why is it? I'm going to play music. Gosh, I hate that. Over 500 apps. And they have them categorized because you can get very quickly lost. Accessibility stuff, which is actually very useful. Lots and lots of development stuff, including an XAMPP. There we go. Get that recording off of there. Education related stuff, which is, depending on what you're doing, can be very useful. It's games. Everybody loves games. And they've got tons and tons of those. We've got a lot of really useful graphics stuff. A lot of really useful, their internet related stuff, like they've got a lot of little lightweight browsers. They've got email and things of that nature. Some of it may be perfect for you anyways, to just go to one of these lightweight email clients and use that for your email as opposed to some bulky thing that you're normally using. They've got a lot of video and music manipulation and editing stuff, all your favorite Office-y type stuff. And all of this is freeware. So you've got like LibreOffice and what was the other one? OpenOffice, which is now Apache's OpenOffice. PDF viewers, security stuff, zips and utilities and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like it just goes on and on and on and on and on. So that is portable apps. It's a really good, it's like I said, there is a Mac one. It is last time I tried it, it was based on like OS 12 or something. It was a while back. And it's really gotten to the point that honestly, I looked at it and there were none of those apps I needed, because any machine I've got what I need on it, basically, because I just like drop it on there and I'm ready to go. I could take any, like you can take, if you want to take, if you want to use Eclipse, you throw it on your machine, but then you could just pull you just got the package thing and you can just install it wherever you need to. If it's obviously if it's another Mac thing, a lot of times it's just as easy to use some sort of browser-based, cloud-based kind of thing to do your IDE, or you can use there's a lot of lightweight ones as well. Actually, Visual Studio Code, when it's minus its plugins, is pretty small. Right now, you can, like everything, you can fatten it up with plugins as well. Any parting thoughts on this one? Go ahead.
Yeah, so on the flip side of that, if you are not in a cloud environment, or you're going to be in an environment where you have a like a Chromebook or some type of machine that is not your typical machine and you can't install stuff to it. The other thing you could do that we didn't really touch on is, other than containers, for a long time now, you've had Linux and even Windows to an extent. You can actually boot from a thumb drive, and you can basically take your whole system with you on a USB stick or an external drive. Or even, as Rob mentioned, you take a snapshot with the CD or DVD and you pop that in, and you can run your entire OS virtually from the environment. Now, you still have to store your data potentially to a thumb drive or an external device, but that is another option you could do to kind of be virtual and not locked down to a particular environment.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd forgotten about that. I used to use that back in the day where I had a full bootable, and it was an emergency kind of thing, but it was like, if I needed to, I could plug that. It was, plug the hard drive in, and I could actually run off of that for a while. So I didn't have to actually repair my machine. I could just be like, screw it. As long as I can get in, I'll launch it, and we're ready to go. Hopefully you're ready to go, because we are. We're going to wrap this one up, and we're going to dive right into our next stuff. As far as we're concerned, as far as you're concerned, it'll probably take you a little while. So you get to pause and come back, and we will talk about our next episode. Go out and have a great time. Check out the show notes for links and things like that. And let us know if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, jokes, any of that kind of stuff. We take it all, and we take it under advisement. We may not use it, especially if it's a dirty joke, but hey, the rest of the stuff we will probably find useful. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your time, and we will see you again soon.